Tuesday. So we are back, Tool House, Tuesday Tool. And I'm back here again with Laura with One Tree Montessori, and she's on
Hi,
holiday.
everyone.
She's on holiday, and also very excited about talking with us today about the benefits of observation. And Maria Montessori taught us that observation is really, really key. And when we take time to observe, then we know what our lessons are going to be. That's how we plan our lessons, is by observing and seeing how the children are working and what areas they're working and what their needs are moving forward. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about observation, and hopefully everybody will learn and grow and take away some awesome insights.
Thanks, Shawn. First off, really happy to be back. It's been a while since our last talk, but what you said about observation is really true, right? Whenever you hear Montessori, you immediately think of, okay, observation, scientific, lots of record keeping and whatnot. But I think it's important to just quickly put in context why the observation is such a big deal for us, because people have to remember that when Dr. Maria Montessori developed this method, the schools were very different from what they are today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the children got stuffed into a classroom and some person up in government decided what they needed to learn without ever actually, looking at the children. And what Maria Montessori did with her medical background is she went about developing her method of education as scientifically as she could. She treated it as an experiment. She put things in, she saw, okay, this didn't work. She tried out different, like the color boxes. Mm-hmm. She tried out multiple different colors to see which ones the children responded to the best.
Oh.
And then only chose those colors. The shades and the
yeah
things.
Then helping them with their visual acuity, developing
exactly,
strengthening their visual sense. Mm-hmm.
So and that was really new in that time, because education just had been basically parrot repeating of instructions from the teacher.
Yes.
And she actually sat down and she watched. I mean, in a first school, the Casa de Bambini, she had a teacher in the classroom and she would go in and sit in a corner and watch, which allowed her to notice things and see things and really develop this awesome method that the world uses at the moment. So in today's context, I think observation is a lot more commonplace in all kinds of schools, because we're a very data-driven society by now, right? Everyone wants numbers and statistics and to know this and to know that. So I think in observation generally, for Montessori teachers, it's quite easy to get caught up in the whole paperwork side of it, and for parents, it's like, okay, but where do I even start? Because really, truly observing is something that you have to put a lot of effort in. It's not something that we were taught as children, we had to learn it as adults.
Right. And we had to learn how to do that to receive our Montessori training, which was really, really valuable. Spending out, weeks in a classroom with a notebook observing certain children. And you remember, we also had the task of observing one child. So sometimes there were general observations, but sometimes they're observing one child. And through those observations, then you can see what they're interested in, what their style of learning is. And then once you know that child, then you can
triggers.
Yes. And then you can start
more help with.
But I like that too. You can use their interest to weave in math lessons and language lessons. And this child really likes dinosaurs. So I know how to engage him and get him excited about writing or reading or even math.
Yeah, exactly. So why I chose to talk about observation today is because it's something that I really enjoy, and I know it can be quite daunting for parents. And I know that when my teacher took over the 3 to 6 environment from me, she learned how to observe in the course, but then being thrown into the classroom and having to handle everything and then still take observations and stuff, it was a bit overwhelming for her. So I think it's really important to remember that the observation is something that you should practice daily. And I've got a couple tips on how to do that.
Oh, great.
And before I dive into those tips, I just want to reiterate why it's so important, because there's a sort of scientific educational reason, and then there's also an interpersonal relationship-based reason, right? Because from an educational point of view, we want to observe so that we can better educate the children. Like you said, use their interests, know exactly where they need help, know their strengths, see their learning style, and then meet them where they are. And we can only do that if we observe them. But at the same time, and this might even be a more important reason on some levels, is that when we truly start to observe, we get to know our children, our students, on a whole different level. And we build such an intricate relationship with them, that really helps them on all levels, not just the academic one. It helps them on the emotional side, feeling seen, feeling heard, on the discipline side, because we are less likely to take in the moment decisions about discipline because we know the children, we know how they react, we know they've been working on this kind of thing.
Yes.
So I really think it's something that's definitely worth putting in the effort every day.
Right.
To practice that observation.
Yes.
And I have to completely throw this in here, because a friend of mine, Claudia Mann, she's an actual observation course, like a 21-day mini course to rejuvenate your observation.
Yes, I saw that. I was thinking about that as you were talking.
Yeah. So I'll be sure to drop the link in the YouTube description, because I just think it's so awesome. There's daily audios, and as soon as I'm done with my holiday, I'm signing up for it.
Okay, very good. Yeah, well, I love everything you're saying, because Maria Montessori, it was through her observation that she realized and was able to teach us that children actually like to learn. And if you foster their independence appropriately and respectfully, they become their own educators in so many ways. And that really,
definitely.
yeah, and then that really feeds their sense of capability, which is really, really powerful. And then it was through her observations as well that she realized schools don't have to be teacher centered. They can be child centered. If you give children the freedom to work on things, freedom within limits, they will do that. And the teacher can be kind of in the background, giving individual or small group lessons to children based on their need, rather than standing at the front of the room telling everybody what to do. So
yeah, I mean, I always have to laugh when parents come into the classroom and they sort of stop, and you can see them entirely confused because they can't see me, because I'm generally, on the floor with a group of children, and like they're looking for a person standing, and there's just no one, because the children learn so much easier when you're down there and getting your hands dirty, metaphorically.
I know, it's like a little factory in the classrooms. It's so great. And that's what Maria Montessori said, right? If we're doing our job as well as we should be, then the children could work with us not even being present. We don't even have to be there, and the children continue on working, which I've seen in brief moments. Obviously, we don't abandon our classrooms, but if you have to step out for a while, they just continue on and working. And
no, it's really nice to get there, and the only way to get there is if you really ramp up your observation, because otherwise you can't meet their needs, and then it's not going to get there. And that's as true as it in the classroom as it is in the home. You want your children to be independent, so you need to watch them to see where you can give them, when you can give them, and how you can give them that independence.
So for children who are being homeschooled and what tips do you have for parents to start this whole process?
So there's first of there's sort of like informal observations that you just take notes with your mind as you go through the day,
Mm-hmm.
where you just notice things. And we often do that already unconsciously. So it's just a matter of making a conscious decision of, okay, today I'm going to notice and remember things. And it helps at the end of the day to just write down what you remember.
Right.
But then I think in the classroom and at home, even if you don't homeschool your children, it's really beneficial to take an hour, even 2 hours a week in between or in a block and just sit and watch your children, um, and watch what they do and tell them this is your work. They can't
Yeah.
interrupt you now. You're working, you'll be fascinated by what you see. So, and then when you sit down and actually take notes while observing, then you can use a couple of different techniques. So for example, you can just write down whatever you see, almost like a journal. Just don't judge it, don't put a filter on it, just write, 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 write,
Mm-hmm.
write. And then sift through it later to see things that you wrote down that you maybe didn't consciously realize.
Yeah, or so to pick up on some themes or some,
Mm,
yeah, repetitive habits and things like that.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then you can do time sampling. So maybe you notice that your child struggles with transitions, you know. So then you make a point of every day at 7 o'clock when it's dinner time, you watch carefully to see how the transition goes. You take mental or written notes as you go
Hmm.
along. And then, so that's really nice to see like a pattern over time,
Yes, I
every day
love
at the
that.
same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I love
Um,
that. I think so many parents think that they need to be either doing for or doing with. And
mm,
it's really great to just I love that, allowing them to be independent and then just sitting and watching them and taking notes. I bet that's going to be a great tip for parents that are watching this
yeah.
video.
I mean, obviously, you wouldn't necessarily want to only purely observe them while they're making tea for the first time.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's very valuable to take a step back and remove yourself from the situation,
Hmm.
and take an observer's view. So you can do the journaling, you can do the time sampling. Especially if you have a workspace at home or in the classroom, a really nice thing to do is draw a map of a day and sort of notice where the children gravitate to, where do they run the most, do they bump into certain areas, are
Mm.
certain areas more prone to fights, so that you can adapt your environment to make your day work better.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the science. Yeah. That's the scientific approach, watching
Yeah.
and observing and learning. And then,
And then changing one thing at a time.
yes.
That's really important. Change one thing at a time and then observe again and then change the next thing and then observe again, so that you have as close to an experimental design as you possibly can.
Yeah. I love that.
Um,
Yeah.
and then obviously you can do a case study. So you watch one child over time, to really get to know them.
Hmm.
I think that's a little more applicable for classrooms
Yeah.
than um, than families, because in a family there's not that many people generally.
Hmm.
And then the other one you can watch for is a frequency record. So you pick a behavior and you basically take notes every time it occurs or afterwards if it's a
Hmm.
stressful situation, to also see patterns over time,
Yeah. Like what are the
because
triggers
we
or,
can't,
yeah.
exactly, because we can't remember everything. It's impossible.
Yeah. That's
So
great.
taking the notes, and it makes you so much more conscious of what happens next, because when we start to be aware of something, then we get focused on it. That's
Yeah.
actually the number one tip I was gonna get to later, is that if you don't know how to sort of start observing, is pick a topic, children's behavior, transitions, whatever.
Hmm.
Read a couple of blogs about it. Doesn't have to be a lot. Have a couple of conversations about it with your friends or coworkers or whatever, and then you'll automatically start to notice it more, because our brain works that way. Like
Yeah.
when you start studying Montessori, then you see how every child works immediately. Or when
Yeah.
you study to be a doctor, then every person in your circle is suddenly ill with some disease. That's what you're learning
that you
about.
can cure. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're not quite sure where to start with the observations, especially at home, pick a topic, read about it, and it'll just prime your brain to be more aware of it already. And then you just take notes on it.
Yeah. I know
And
my
you
daughter's in the Montessori training in North Texas, and getting her 0 to 3 training. And so observation is a big
okay, so they're
component
still,
of that
yeah.
training. Lots and lots of observations of, babies at different stages, non-walking or non-moving, non-mobile, mobile babies, walking babies, and then even, 2-year-olds. So lots and lots of hours. And yeah, that's the children teach us what they need. If we observe them closely, and then we can actually meet their needs instead of just interacting with them and treating them all the same.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're not all the same. Sure,
That's right.
they have certain universal milestones and needs and developmental stages, but in the end, every child goes through these differently based on their genetic makeup, based on their family background, based on what they ate that day. So it's
Or
really
how much
important
sleep
to
they got,
establish,
or
yeah. Or if they didn't see their favorite color on the way to school.
yes, and the consistency and the routine and the order is so important for those young children as well too.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's good for parents to know too, is when their schedule and their routine changes, they can potentially expect more meltdowns and more tantrums and things like that,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
children like
because
their routines.
exactly, it makes them feel safe. So if you got into the habit of observation, you would probably likely know which child would respond to which kind of help coming up to a transition or a routine change or something, because you've watched them before and you've seen, okay, so if I tell Timmy that it's time to go sleep, when it's time to go sleep, then he has a meltdown. So let me try tell him 5 minutes beforehand. And then, okay, it works a little better, but it still wasn't ideal. So maybe next time I try 10 minutes and give him a choice. Do you want to have your bedtime story in bed or on the couch, to make them feel empowered in the process? And you can, if you're not aware of these things, if you just go through life sort of blind, you know,
Transactionally, yes.
then every day you're just going to have a fight with little Timmy about bedtime, because and it might sound harsh, but basically you're not trying to understand what's wrong, so you can't fix the problem, and then it's just always a problem, and that's not nice for
Right.
anyone.
Yeah, and you can put band-aids on it, but actually observing and understanding, and then moving forward by meeting the need is the best way.
Yeah,
And yeah, that all takes observation, and the understanding comes from the observation. So this is a great
exactly.
reminder.
Yeah, you have to be aware of something to be able to work with it. And we become aware through our senses, so we observe with them. That's what we do. So I just want to go through the tips quickly for actually observations.
Okay.
Is now that you've watched the video, you are already conscious of observing, so chances are that your brain's already observing more than it was, because that's the first step. And then you can practice, you can notice, you can pick one thing to notice in a day, and then just make a mental note every time it happens. And so basically train your brain little by little to start noticing more things, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you pick to notice every time your child smiles. So you prime your brain to pay attention to the stimulus, and then you notice it, and you make yourself conscious of the fact that you noticed it. So
And then you'll start noticing the other things as well. Yes.
exactly. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so you have to work your brain a little bit to get used to it, but it's definitely worth it. Which gets me to the next tip. Take your time. You don't become a great observer overnight. You have to practice at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I said earlier, it's important to really actually schedule time for observations, whether you're at home or in the classroom. Make sure that if your children need support during that time, you have a partner or a friend or your assistant covering for you, that it doesn't go horribly wrong. We don't want anyone to hurt themselves.
Yeah, I know
But
some teachers that actually put like a necklace on, and the children know when the teacher has that necklace on that she's observing, and they have to seek help and support from the older students or maybe the assistant teacher.
Exactly. Or you get a special cushion, or you get a special notebook, some visual cue that's like, okay, guys, I'm not available right now. Yeah. And then what's really important with the observations, and this might actually be the hardest part to do, is that you have to distinguish between what you think and what you see, because we want the observations to be as objective as possible, because we very naturally bring our own lens into the observation. We perceive things and judge them as we understand the world, and it can happen that we then assign the wrong meaning to a situation that we've observed. Which is why I think taking notes in the beginning is really important, because then you take notes very strictly of what you see. Then you don't write, for example, that John and Sally had a fight. That's a judgment. You would write that John pulled on the truck and Sally pushed John over, and then they both cried. So it sounds like a fight. But if you write down what you saw, then you're better able to think about it later, because John and Sally had a fight. That's a very general statement. You can't actually do anything with it.
Yeah, I talk with my when I was heading to school, I would talk with my staff about that as well when they're having parent-teacher conferences. Instead of using generalities such as your child's disrespectful, they don't know what that means, so
it means different things to different people.
So he came in and he kicked, or he threw something, or he bit some, those they need specific details. So I like that too, steering away from the generalities when you're taking observations and what exactly is happening.
So you have to get rid of the expectations. Even if the child has kicked and screamed for the past 5 days every time they came to school, you expect nothing when you sit down and you observe and you write down exactly what happens, because chances are, if you expect it to happen again, then you look for signs that would confirm your expectation, right? It's the confirmation bias. And you miss other signs because of that selective attention. So
that makes so much sense.
It's really important to just clear your mind and treat it as something completely new. Be curious, like, what's going to happen today? What do I get to witness? And then just write down what you see, not what you thought happened.
So we're setting aside a certain amount of time. We're sitting down to take these notes, and when we're doing it, we're being conscious to write down exactly what we see, rather than putting labels on it or turning them into generalities. And then exactly. And then is there another step moving past that?
Basically, you have to actually use your observations. Exactly. Because the aim is we're gathering all this data to make informed decisions. And everyone hates ads on their social media, right?
Yes. I'm jotting these notes down myself. That's why I'm looking down. Okay.
So I'm using the example of ads because even though it's something we generally feel as an invasion of privacy, it's a perfect example of why it's so important to observe. Because basically when we observe, we gather data about the children and the way they use the world. And then we're able to make personalized recommendations about what they would need.
Great.
So yes, ads are irritating, but it's more irritating to me to see an ad about, say, snowboarding in Norway when I live in Namibia, because it has nothing to do with my
where you
personal
are.
reality,
Right. Perfect.
yeah.
And then, so now we're making these informed decisions based on maybe how we can meet this child's needs a little bit better and interact with them in a way that where we can invite cooperation and support, and right, because we're helping them reach their full potential all the time.
Yeah.
And then I think I heard you say too, as you're doing this, you're making changes slowly, like one at a time.
Yeah, one thing at a time. Because if okay, say for example, you've noticed that in your classroom there's always a crowd of children in the coat room, right?
Right.
Okay. So then you change the coat room layout, that there's less space, and you get the children to put their shoes on outside the coat room. Now you don't know which of those changes solve the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good point.
That's why it's important to do one thing at a time.
Yes.
You know?
Well, and
And
I
then
think,
reevaluate.
I've taught elementary for years, 6 to 9 and 9 to 12, and I sometimes I would actually have some of the older children that could write and had developed that concentration and control and coordinated movement to a certain level, have them observe as well. And then we could discuss things like crowded coat room where people are tripping over each other at a class meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's great. I love that.
That's really that's actually a great point, because like I think, as I said earlier, right at the beginning, that we didn't learn as children to observe.
Yes, and now we're modeling that
for the most part. And exactly, now we're modeling it. And even with toddlers, you can point out things. You can say, look, her head is down, her shoulders are slumped, she's probably sad, let's go check on her.
Yeah. And then you're teaching them
or
vocabulary of emotions and
exactly. Or you've bumped into this table 3 times in the last 2 days. Let's see if we need to move it to make this area easier for you to walk through. And it teaches them to be very attentive to their own life.
and critical, and developing those critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
So awesome. So we're going to set aside time. Well, first it's just a matter of teaching your brain to kind of observe and be aware by focusing on maybe one attribute of the child, like they're smiling, or when they're running instead of walking, or something like that, to train our brain. And then
to become aware and prime our brain.
And then once we're primed, we actually set aside time during the day to observe. We take notes. We take notes that are specific, actually what's going on. Review the data, because that's the purpose of the observation, is to understand the children better. And then if we have ideas about making some changes to better support that child, to do those slowly, so that you can see actually what changes are actually having an impact, a positive impact.
Yeah. And then observe again and record more. And then just to finish off, a quick word, especially for teachers. It often happens that you may observe or notice something that you're not quite sure how you would support to improve the situation. And it's really important that when you share your observations and thoughts with other teachers, that you take out any identifying features and characteristics, because we have to be very mindful of the privacy of the children.
Oh, okay. Good. Yeah.
So that's teacher specific. It's really great to have such a community of people that you can connect with, that can help you. You just have to remember to leave out the gender, leave out the age, leave out the location, don't say names, don't mention the school, just to make sure, because besides the legal obligation, you want to protect the children.
We wouldn't want notes about, if somebody observed us, we wouldn't want that information all over the world, and it's not appropriate to do that for the children either, or to the children. All right, well, this was so very helpful.
Okay.
I loved it.
I'm glad. I enjoyed it.
Because observation, it's, oh yeah, observation, sit and watch. But it's much deeper than that. And you've really kind of helped us move into that and look at the different steps, and the whole purpose of it is, how can we support this child in his or her journey of reaching her full potential? And we're also developing ourselves more too as we do this, right? Because we really honor the ability to focus and concentrate that as children develop those, and it's helping us develop that as well. I mean, we're on our own journeys and have our own work to do.
Exactly. And by practicing, becoming more observant, you also become more observant to your own needs, the needs of the people around you. And it makes every part of life so much easier, that there's no reason not to do it.
And more clear, just clarity. Yeah, I love that. All right. Well, thank you. And I look forward to our next session, whenever that is. I'm sure we'll be scheduling that.
Definitely.
But thanks a lot for joining me again. And I hope everybody loves this session.